Hello, welcome to SquishiVision, where I give in this case, where I give my immediate thoughts having watched the episode. There's no kind of detailed analysis here. I've not made notes. I've not kind of thought things through. This is kind of straight off the top of my head what I thought of the episode. Usually I do these streams immediately after I finished watching the broadcast episode, but I made the slight... Well, I forgot, and I accidentally scheduled a D&D session straight after the episode ended, so I had to basically do that for 2.5 hours. I didn't have to, obviously. I wanted to play the game. I love D&D, but it did mean there is a bit of a memory gap, so this probably isn't going to be as proper as it was, but that might also mean it's not as long, which might make it more accessible. Anyway, so, first Doctor Who episode we've had since The Timeless Children, that episode which, people have been talking about a lot in all the months since it broadcast, so love it or hate it, it made an impact in the fandom. And then obviously now we've had today, so it's kind of, in a sense, it's been 10 months for those characters, so I can't remember when Timeless Children actually broadcast, but I think it definitely finished broadcasting before March, before we all went into lockdown, so I think about February time. So actually it's been about the same amount of time in real time for us as it has been for at least the Earth characters in this episode. Straight off the bat, I enjoyed this episode, and it felt like a very classic by the book Doctor Who Dalek episode, and that's a good thing in the sense that, well, it's a good thing because I do feel that a lot of people hate change, especially sci-fi fans, which is weird because science fiction is a very new genre and it covers a lot of progressive, both in terms of social action but also in terms of setting themes. So it is kind of odd that, as a fandom, as a genre, people don't tend to like changing the form. It's weird in Doctor Who as well. Doctor Who as a show, I'll say it now, is all about moving on. That's one of the core themes of the show. The Doctor as a character consistently moves on from places he's been to, makes impact on people's lives, and then moves on. This is a theme strongly reiterated in the new series, when core themes are often, to put it maybe not so kindly, hammered in. But there's also been a theme in classic Who. Like there was an episode, Face of Evil, I think it's called, with Tom Baker's Doctor, where it basically we see off screen he had an adventure. He went and saved, or I think what he did is he fixed the computer, but did so by having to imbue some of his own essence into it when he was reprogramming it, and then that had an impact on the civilization many years in the future. It's always been a theme of Doctor Who. So Doctor Who's always about moving on, making new things. Moving on from the past, being progressive, changing things. That's how it's lasted 58 years because of that, but yet somehow the fans still object when new things happen. I thought this episode didn't do any of that. It was a very, for a Doctor Who story, for a Dalek story, it drew from a lot of kind of very classic plot points in a good way. You've got the Daleks invading. Something happened and I didn't really catch a lot of plot points in the first 10 minutes of the episode. I'm going to watch back afterwards and remind myself. But so I don't think they're well, no, even then the humans discovered Daleks, or discovered they didn't realize that they were Daleks, thought there was some way they could benefit from this equipment, from this creature, and attempt to exploit that, and then it comes to backfire them. That's been a thing Doctor Who loads and loads and loads. It doesn't matter if it's a silly trope, if it's a done trope, or if it makes humans look stupid. People in Doctor Who, characters in Doctor Who, supporting characters, who are basically just there as plot points, dropping the idiot ball to use the trope is a core part of Doctor Who that keeps the plot going and makes the plots happen. It often is a result of some human hubris. So that has happened loads. It happened in Power of the Daleks. It's a thing that happens loads. That's what makes this episode very good for me. I don't think very good if you really think about it, because it does a lot of things that previous very famous Doctor Who episodes have done. So much like Power of the Daleks, you have the Daleks being resurrected because somebody found the remains of one and decided to exploit it. You had the Daleks pretending to be allies. Not that actually happened, because that didn't actually happen in all of this episode. No one was actually an ally of. People thought this might be too similar to Victory of the Daleks, where Churchill was tricked by Daleks to use them as weapons so they could infiltrate something on Rebecca. Oh, it was so they could get it was to trick the Doctor into turning up. People thought it was going to be kind of a repeat of those themes, but it hasn't happened. The Daleks who we saw, who were allied with the human, the politicians, who obviously was a Tory, I'm going to put that there, they weren't actually Daleks, they were just the robotic casings. The Daleks hadn't appeared inside it yet. So if that didn't happen, people thought it was going to... so they didn't tread on that as much as people were thinking it was going to be. But, we had this whole thing about... Daleks being resurrected simply because of human hubris. We had the bits about Daleks. We had a bit about the Dalek purity thing, and that's, for me, it had very strong revolution. I think, revolution of the Dalek. No, that's this episode. Remembrance of the Daleks. It has very strong remembrance of the Daleks. Feeling to it that you had kind of pure Daleks versus new Daleks fighting each other. It wasn't a strong point. It wasn't a big part of this episode, but it was a part of it, and that and Remembrance of the Daleks is one of my favorite Doctor Who episodes. Very kind of very. It was one of my favorite Doctor Who episodes. It's one of my favorite Dalek episodes. I think it's a very good Sylvester McCoy episode. I think if I was going to introduce someone to Sylvester McCoy as a Doctor, I would use Remembrance of the Daleks. It's one of the ones I enjoy watching a lot. So that was a part of it. It had very classic vibes to it. The whole build up to the Daleks happening, the pacing. It was an hour and 15 minutes, and it made the most of. It's a lot of classic Doctor because classic Doctor Who. The serials are often 4 episodes long, 4 to 6 or whatever, 5 episodes long. So they have a couple of episodes to build things up, and then they have a couple of episodes for things to happen, and then they have about half of an episode to resolve the issues. I think that's why I prefer serialized format of Doctor Who in terms of being able to tell Doctor Who stories, is because Doctor Who lends itself to that kind of slow burn, in a sense, or it depends on the writer. But my point being here is that this episode of Doctor Who had that same pacing, which had pros and cons. It felt a very classic Doctor Who vibe to it, but it also meant the resolution was very quick at the end, because we had a lot of build up, but then really once the build up had finished, we had a build up which was like this, and then once that had got to that point, it was a very quick kind of resolution of the story. So because of, I did feel that the resolution wasn't disappointing. It wasn't Deus Ex Machina by any means. It didn't feel rushed, but it did feel neat and clean. Not in a bad way, just not in a very memorable way. I realised that they kind of introduced the pure Daleks, I think about half an hour before the episode is due to end, so that was past the halfway point by some margin. It was kind of a third act kind of thing, but really you don't really want to introduce new elements like based on your third act. It wasn't badly done. It was done in a way which is fine. The Doctor was much a bigger part of the story than a lot of speculation would indicate towards it. Loads of people were like, oh, this is going to be a very Doctor Light episode. The Doctor probably won't even appear until the last bit. It's going to be Captain Jack and the companions leading the majority of the story while the Doctor's in jail. We're not really going to see much of the Doctor in this. That was a lot of people speculated throughout kind of most of this episode. But actually, and that's what the trailer kind of implied. But maybe that's kind of the point. The Doctor was actually kind of rescued, I think, about 2/3 of the way through the first act. And by Jack, and that was Jack's kind of first appearance that we see in the episode. And then they all go back to Earth, so we don't actually meet Jack before they meet the Doctor. So that was, I think, good. I think that's what we need, and I think if we had a Doctor Light episode that focused on Jack and gave Jack too much of the limelight, it would give ammunition to all the haters who are like, well, look, John Barrowman can easily lead this series. We don't need Jodie Whittaker, even though Jodie Whittaker is the Doctor. She got the role. Get over it. So I think that was good, and the Doctor was very. Jodie was brilliant in this episode. Whittaker, and yeah, we should talk about the companions because I often do talk about the companions in these kind of things. Again, Toes and Cold just doesn't do anything for me. It just is just that strong lack of well, it's very wooden. There's no expression, for him as an actor. And I think a lot more of my problems. I mean, I've never Doctor Who has never hit or missed for me on the companions. If you'll have strong preferences on companions in Doctor Who, people, often highlight parts of Doctor Who for them based on the companion. For me, the companion is an important part of Doctor Who, but isn't what I focus on. I notice it when it's good. I don't mind it when it's bad or it's just not that great for the most part. So I'm not a fan of Rose Tyler as a character. I felt she was very arrogant and selfish. I don't think she ever really grew from that or had that become a consequence, like as a flaw, and then was dealt with as a consequence of her character. She was probably my least favorite New Who companion. Martha was great, but Martha was what happened. Donna was fantastic. Donna, I think, is the equivalent of Sarah Jane in the New Who era of Doctor Who. Amy and Rory were probably more notable in the longevity more than anything else in particular. And also, by that point, Moffat kind of had that whole thing about making companions the part of the plot of the story rather than just protagonists, which is fine if you execute it well. It's not a big problem, but I think it became too convoluted once you got down to series 8, on the beginning of series 9 or whatever. Series 8, 5, no 7. But even so, yeah, so companions I'm not up about. I think the problem with this trio of characters is they didn't really bounce off each other very well, and it became more telling when they split up. And whoever was with the Doctor, as long as it wasn't Ryan, if it was Yaz with the Doctor or Graham with the Doctor, it was interesting. Graham more so, but maybe that's more to do with Bradley Walsh's experience as an actor. He's got a much longer acting career. He's been in soaps, so he can. I don't really watch soaps often, but I mean, they're not. They tend to be. They tend to be acted very well in a soap fashion, but they're acted well for that genre. So Graham was fine. Yaz was okay. Yaz was kind of always hit and miss. But Yaz was like as any other companion that I didn't really particularly care about was. But Ryan just never. So whenever they split up, and it was always Ryan and whoever Ryan was, I just zoned out because I didn't really care much about them. Whoever was the Doctor, I cared about. So I didn't really mind Ryan leaving. I a bit more sad about Bradley Walsh leaving because Bradley Walsh was the strongest of the 3 companions. And I don't. Yaz is okay, but there wasn't really that connection between Yaz and the Doctor for me. And I think a lot of that before was. I don't mind large TARDIS crews. In fact, I actually prefer larger TARDIS crews. I think TARDIS crews with 2 companions is good. I like it when you can. I like it when, because the companion is always meant to be a audience surrogate. I always like it when they have somebody else, who's also a companion, who they can talk about from their mutual understanding of what they're seeing, rather than just between them and the Doctor. I always like hearing the conversations between them and other people like them, as well as hearing conversations between them and the Doctor. So I don't mind there being 2 or 3 companions, but I think then they have to work out what. But then you still have to establish the individual dynamic, and this has always been a problem because there's always been a main companion. I guess until actually this installation, there's always been a main companion. Even when Jack and Adam were part of the TARDIS, you still had Rose as the main companion. When Mickey was part of the TARDIS, you still had Rose as the main companion. When you had, Martha didn't have anyone else travelling with them apart from briefly. Well, no, it didn't actually. I don't think they did. Apart from Jack, obviously, at the end. But it was still about Martha. Donna, you had Martha. Donna was just Donna until you had Martha briefly, and then you had everyone else at the end, but it was still about Donna. But when we came to Moffat's era, where multiple companions were a norm, Amy was still the main companion. Rory was around Amy. Bill was still the main. Clara was still the main companion. Clara didn't really have anyone else traveling with them. But Bill was still the main companion, and Nardole was around Bill. You see what I'm saying? So this is the first time we've had 3 companions, and not a particular one of them is more important than the other, and that's fine. But you still need to work on the connection between them individually, the Doctor. You can't do their connection as a group to the Doctor. You need a connection between them each individually and the Doctor, and we didn't get that. Graham, I knew more about Graham and the Doctor's relationship than any other characters, so that's why Graham and the Doctor worked. I didn't know what Yaz and the Doctor's relationship was, and they build on it more in this episode in a way it doesn't really feel earned, which is the problem. So, but Yaz at least had a bit more character to her, but only a tiny bit more, so she was tolerable. Ryan just had no character to him, and I guess we'll talk about the ending scene now before anything else. So I liked the episode as a whole. I felt it was a very good, traditional, decent Doctor Who episode, so I enjoyed it for the most part. And I felt like it came to a natural ending when Ryan and Graham left, and we cut to black, and that seemed like a fine ending. And then for some bizarre reason, they've got to pull in this extra cringy as heck scene where we cut back to Ryan trying to practice riding a bike. A callback to his very first appearance in Doctor Who. As if that has any emotional resonance with us as an audience, which we don't, because, look, I'm dyspraxic. So I feel like I have a bit more authority to talk about this than most average viewers of Doctor Who. I'm dyspraxic. I would otherwise love the fact that dyspraxia is getting some kind of representation in media because it's not really talked about. To the point where I didn't realise I was dyspraxic until it would have been helpful if I learned earlier. So it's great we're getting some representation, but the representation is so watered down and useless. And the fact that it was, I think, from memory, it's mentioned as a plot point in The Woman Who Felt Worth, the very first episode we see Ryan in. Then perhaps one or two other episodes of the first series that Ryan appears in, his dyspraxia is brought up. I think there's a line about not bad for a kid of dyspraxia that we get in the episode that has him and his dad, which I think is possibly Spiders, Arachnids of the UK, that he says that in, possibly. And then and there's a couple of other mentions, and then after that, it just doesn't come up again. Like, you don't have to constantly talk about someone's disability if you have a disabled character. You need to write them as people first. And then, but it's difficult. There's a balance. Because when you have a character who is representing a marginalised group, there's a nice sweet spot, which is between empty virtue signalling representation and ham-fisted, on-the-nose, no character or representation. So if you write a character who is disabled and the only thing about them is a disability, nothing else, they're not a person, it's constantly about disability, that's the only reason they're there, and they're given no substance or arc when all the other characters are doing, that's bad representation because you're not writing a person. But alternative, if you just have a character and it's only an informed characteristic that they're disabled, that's bad representation as well. You need to get in the middle where they're a person, but you don't forget the fact that they're also disabled, because the whole point of representation is people remember that and apply that to their real life situation, so they know when they meet someone who's actually disabled, they treat them like a person. Ryan was a character whose disability was an informed characteristic. Now, dyspraxia would be tricky to write, because dyspraxia is a form of neurodiversity, and it's, as the name suggests, it's very widespread in what it kind of entails. Not everyone who's dyspraxic has motor impairments. A lot of them do, it's one of the key features, but not all of them do it, and then it's to different extents. And some people with dyspraxia have a lot of information with kind of remembering, steps and things like that. I actually think there was an episode, I think it was Kablam, where they have to infiltrate the Space Amazon, and he mentions about how he found such tasks difficult because he forgot the steps. That was great, because people don't really talk about that as a thing people with dyspraxia suffer from. But that was about it. And so a callback to his dyspraxia as he leaves felt cheap and empty to me as someone with dyspraxia, because I'm like, well, really, what are you kind of... It feels like you're rewarding yourself telling a story you never told. And it's not as if his bike scene was really that crucial to his character arc, so we have to end on. Like, I don't care if Ryan knows how to ride a bike or not. It felt like it just for me, ruined the ending of the episode. Then we had to stick there for it. And then, for some bizarre reason, we see a Force ghost of Grace, who admittedly was an important character to Ryan and Graham somewhat in their first series, but for the last couple of years, they've barely brought them up. And we as the audience, certainly, I imagine, don't care about Grace. Grace served her plot relevant purpose of being an emotional start to certain aspects of Graham and Ryan's character arc, search if it existed or didn't exist. It was like the character of Grace and the actress who played her have no emotional resonance for us as a viewer to justify a callback to her character. And it was such a weird scene. Like, what, like, were they both having the same flashback? That's not how people work. I don't think, anyway. Or was she actually there? Was there some kind of weird space? It just seems really weird way, really cringy and disappointing way for the episode. I didn't feel comfortable watching that scene, and it kind of ruined the end of the episode for me. Speaking of character arcs, Graham. Graham was definitely the strongest companion, but that didn't mean he got a particularly strong character arc either. But that's fine, because most companions don't get character arc. Character arcs in Doctor Who aren't you, but it's a show that usually keeps moving on, but doesn't really develop characters so much as it develops things around them, and then things come in on big steps. But there was a whole controversy about Graham's cancer scene last year. So to remind you, there was an episode last year, I think it was the one where people were having nightmares and people were invading the nightmares. There was something to do with nightmares, and I can't remember now. But Graham basically confided in the doctor that his cancer had relapsed, and he was scared because his cancer had relapsed. And the doctor was basically like, I should probably say something comforting right now, but nothing's springing to mind. I'm not going to comment on that scene in terms of how well it was executed or written. I can see why people criticised it, and I can appreciate that how it came across. But put that aside for a second. Graham basically said his cancer was back. And it was made as if it was a big thing. Like, it was at the end of an episode, and it had no relevance it had little relevance to the rest of the episode. So you'd think it would go somewhere, right? You'd think the fact that his cancer had returned, if it was going to drop at all, it would go somewhere. Otherwise, that entire scene really didn't serve any purpose at all. But now the character's left. And I think this is final. I don't think this is like, the same way that Amy Rory left in the God Complex and then came back a bit later on. I think this is final for these characters. So that's the kind of impression I've been given. And yet we saw nothing about cancer. I actually thought there was a part where Graham was like, by the way, doctor, I was wrong. And I thought he was going to say, I don't have cancer, which would have been kind of hilarious in a very dark way in terms of the writers just retconning, or not retconning, but kind of just ignoring a plot point, but at least acknowledging it happened. But instead it was something like, oh yeah, there are Sheffields there are aliens in Sheffield. So I guess it was another callback to like the first episode he appeared in. But yeah. Right, I'm glad Ryan's gone. Not happy that Graham's gone. I think Graham had the most potential, but it might be interesting to see how to develop Yaz's character here. We got a new companion though, played by John Bishop, who is going to play a character called Dan, which is interesting. It's interesting because really they don't tend to cast companions main cast Doctor Who as people who are particularly well known, have strong, long established careers. I was having this argument with someone the other day. It's not a firm rule, but and it changes depending on the medium. But say a lot of people who are cast as the Doctor and the companions have some kind of following and some kind of professional background, but they're not household names, and usually Doctor Who makes them the household name. John Bishop as a companion is very much, he's the same kind of tier of celebrity as Bradley Walsh was, and Bradley Walsh was somewhat surprising because Bradley Walsh is a kind of a household name if you're into your daytime entertainment shows, light entertainment shows. And obviously, Bradley Walsh has made a career as a game show host, more so as an actor in recent years. John Bishop is somewhat well known as a comedian in the comedian circuit. So if you're into comedy, you'll know who John Bishop is. So he strikes you more as a guest star rather than the regular cast. So it was a really left-wing surprising announcement that they made there in terms of John Bishop's casting. But from what we can tell, it's going to be just Dan and Yaz in TARDIS next series. So at least, hopefully with 2 other main cast members, it'll give them a chance to actually build those relationships. And I hope they remember they haven't actually built a relationship between Yaz and the Doctor yet. Other than what we saw in this episode, which again, didn't feel really deserved. I get why the companions were upset they hadn't seen the Doctor in 10 months. Like, I get why if someone disappeared from your life for 10 months, and when you saw them again, you would be upset. And so I guess it's not really for me to say how you deal with that kind of trauma and grief and how quickly you should recover from it. But also, you assumed she was, well, firstly, why would you assume she was going to come back at all? Like, you thought, like, that's the time you saw her, she's about to go kill herself, and then you don't see her again. So know why you would spend all that time growing that anger at them not coming back. I don't know, maybe that's justified. Again, it's hard to say 'cause it's grief. The point I'm trying to make is, if someone disappeared from my life and then came back 10 months later, I would be upset that there wasn't an explanation, but I feel the mess of emotions, but I feel, first of all, I'd be happy that they were back and alive and safe. I don't know, it's grief. Grief isn't rational, so maybe I'm being a bit unfair here. I just don't feel... I feel there was a lot of anger towards the Doctor, even after they explained they were in jail, and therefore trapped, and it wasn't particularly their fault. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a bit unfair and nitpicky on that point. It just seemed a lot of focus on the episode about the Doctor abandoning them for 10 months. It's the same issue I had with Buffy, to be honest. When Buffy came back, everyone in season 3 after running away from her home, and then she came back, and I'm like, this person ran away because she was emotionally traumatized. Why are you? But anyway, that's actually a different thing altogether, so I'm kind of on a tangent here. Yeah, I don't know, I felt a little bit unfair towards the Doctor in their anger. I really just should be more happy that she actually was alive and came back. But that's by. Yeah, John Barrowman as Captain Jack is a difficult one to really think about how I feel. Like I said earlier, and like I started off this episode with, Doctor Who is about moving on. So traditionally, Doctor Who didn't do much in terms of callbacks, in terms of characters. More so, in a sense, I feel in the Second Doctor era, in Patrick Troughton's era, that was more of a case, and then it became... I don't know, like, apart from Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, once a character left, and apart from his character, and apart from appearances in Multi-Doctor Anniversary specials, once a character left Doctor Who, they've left. They don't tend to come back. I think the Brigadier is probably the only character in Classic Who I could think of who came back after making an appearance and then being done. Like, sometimes a character, like, for example, the Professor from the Yeti episodes, they came back. That was fine. Sometimes guest characters appear in 2 different serials. But apart from the Master and apart from the Brigadier, outside of plot relevant reasons, they don't usually come back sometime later, is what I'm saying. Because now maybe it was more a case of what we expect from TV back then, when repeated viewings wasn't a thing and they would make TV for the current audience. Assuming your fans knew about past events wasn't the norm, so they didn't want to build up too much on that. Obviously, modern TV is different. Things more accessible. People like looking back at things that happened, and so things are more fresh in people's memories. But I think Russell T Davies bringing back characters quite a lot gave you the impression that Doctor Who was kind of a show where characters came back a lot. And that's not really what Doctor Who's ever really been about. It's been an exception more than it's been the case. The point I'm trying to make is you should only bring back a character if you have a story that needs him to be brought back into. you shouldn't bring him back just for fan service, because then I think you demean what a lot of Doctor Who is about in terms of moving on. So with that being the case, the question I've asked myself is, was Jack's appearance in this episode justified or not? Like, his appearance in Prison of Jadoon arguably wasn't justified, but I was completely fine with it because it wasn't announced, so it wasn't just some empty way to promote the episode. It wasn't a marketing ploy. It was there as a reward. It felt like a reward to the viewers. Like, you watch the episode, here is an Easter egg. Good job. This was obviously part of the marketing, and it's unclear if this was a plan when they recast Jack, when they brought the character back in the last series. So I don't hugely think that Jack's contribution to this episode wasn't something which the episode needed. A lot of what he did, I suppose, could have been done by any other guest character who was made up, but I don't think it distracted too much from the episode either, hugely. So I'm very much I'm ambivalent to him there from a storytelling point of view, so I guess all I should do is, as a fan, enjoy the fact that he came back. But I guess, I don't know, but then again, we don't really see much kind of interaction between him and the Doctor, so we don't, I guess, that's another thing. You brought the character back, and on the one side you don't want to overfill this episode with Jack to take away the spotlight from the main cast, but on the other hand, I kind of want to know what the crack is with Jack. Like, what's new with him? How has he changed? What's his dynamic with the Doctor now? More so than we get kind of given. You see what I'm trying to say here? Like, you brought him back, we didn't really do anything with him that made Jack Jack. There were a couple of nice bits. There were a couple of also cringy bits. Like, there was a line that Jack said, which was like, "I'm Captain Jack Harkness. I'm immortal." Says that line, and it's a one-liner, but it has no relevance to the threat. Like, that'd be a good one-liner to give if you were being threatened with death and it was an actual viable threat. But he said a line immediately before teleporting away. It's a weird one-liner to give before you escape. It's like if someone had a gun to me and was like, "I'm going to blow you to pieces with my cannon," and I'm like, "You can certainly try, but I'm wearing anti-cannon armor," and then I click my fingers and I disappear magically as my other abilities, would be a weird one-liner to do, because it's not relevant to what I do next. Your one-liner should be relevant to your succeeding or preceding action. So it was annoying, because that was a line written clearly purely for a trailer, and it was in the trailer, and it was a very exciting line. Well, I didn't find it exciting. I think I said at the time, actually found it very cringy. But it excited lots of other people. I don't want to criticize their outlook on life. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't like it when people write things for stories for marketing. I just don't like it. I have this thing where if I make it big and I regularly make art people want to watch, when I market it, instead of a trailer, I want to make a short film that acts as a trailer. In the same way, a lot of Pixar marketing tends to be original things and not actually any footage from the thing. At least the teasers are. That's kind of my goal in life, and I think a lot more people should do this. Hey, A. Briggs, welcome to joining the stream. I think I'm about to wrap up, actually, but because I've been talking for like half an hour now. But yeah, I don't know how I feel about Jack. I feel like as a character, he didn't really deserve to be in an episode. He didn't really do anything which any other character could have done. We don't really see much Jack moments other than throwaway lines. There were some nice bits as well. The line in the thing where Yaz basically is like, "Are you a very insecure person because you need a lot of praise?" I like that bit, and it was better executed in the context of the scene it was in the trailer made out to be, because that was one of the lines I criticised in the trailer, I remember, but I actually enjoyed it in the episode. But again, it's still a fan service line. And Jack's an interesting character when you use him properly. He's very dark. The thing is, Jack's a very dark character. He's always been a very dark character. Ever since he was introduced, he was meant to be a more morally grey version of the Doctor. He happily used sidearms. He was happy to kill people. He was happy to exploit, manipulate people using his charm, things like that. He was served to be like a count. His whole purpose when he was introduced was to be a rival to the Doctor. And obviously then we see him grow in the later half of Series 1. And then he comes back in Series 3. And, again, even there we allude to how he's a darker character. He does all the more action, violent things. He has to be kind of reined in by the Doctor. Obviously, I'm not expecting him to go tortured level of dark, but we know he's a dark character. And we know he's a more ambiguous character. And the thing is, Chris Shinble wrote this character in Torchwood, because I think Chris Shinble was one of the head writers for Torchwood before he moved over to Doctor Who. So he should know this character very well. But he's written as very cheesy. He's really more comedic than anything else, which is the kind of the more disappointing thing, I guess. I'm not saying he can't be used comedically, because John Barrowman obviously has that talent, but I feel like he works when you balance his comedic nature to offset his dark nature, and that's, I think, was what was missing. But yeah, I think I've covered all the major aspects of this episode. Covered the plot. I think they should have killed Jack Robertson off, but maybe they're saving him again for another character, for another series. But yeah, I've covered a lot of the plot. It didn't feel like a special, if that makes sense. Maybe we should talk about this. The Christmas specials of Doctor Who felt festive. They felt Christmassy. They felt like big events. Most of them, anyway. They always had a sense of grandiose to them that normal episodes didn't lack, but didn't choose to go through. So the first one, Christmas Invasion, felt festive for the genre wise and the theme, but also kind of just in terms of scale, music, mise en scène, everything kind of felt bigger, etc. The Voyage of the Damned had the same kind of thing. Runaway Bride, same kind of thing. Maybe less so with the Capaldi specials. They kind of didn't have so much of that. Certainly the Return of Doctor Mysterio. But even the Return of Doctor Mysterio didn't feel festive, but it felt grandiose. You get what I'm saying? There's always that sense of grandiose holidayness to the Christmas specials, but now we've gone to New Year specials. They just feel like longer episodes, rather than that's something they're lacking. They should have a more grandiose nature to them. But this could easily have been, what was it? 75 minutes. So that could have easily been. That's a short of a two-parter at the end of the day. So this felt actually more like a two-parter than anything else. We get some continuation of Timeless Children thing. It didn't really follow. I felt like the whole point of the resolution of Timeless Children. This is what a lot of people forget. Maybe I should talk about Timeless Children a bit, because when I made my last episode about it, I just watched it, so I hadn't really absorbed people's opinions of it. I think a lot of people have missed the point of the Timeless Children, the episode, the Timeless Child reveal. Here's how I interpret what happened. There was a being who we will refer to as a child, who was found by, the original Gallifreyans, adopted. They discovered their ability to regenerate, which was unique to them at that point, and not the Gallifreyans, and reverse engineered that by experimenting and killing them over and over and over and over again until they were able to reverse engineer that and kickstart Time Lord Society. And as part of this society, this being as a child had some prominence. They became part of a group called the Division, and they did certain tasks for them. I imagine maybe dark tasks, but it's not really clear. And then at some point, they decided that needs to bury what the child was and pretend that they didn't happen, and ignore that and basically bury them. So instead of a child, they wiped their memory, and then they got the being of a child and essentially turned them into a brand new newborn Time Lord. The Doctor says, the Doctor speculates this, so it's not confirmed on screen. The Doctor speculates that they said they must have got me and turned me maybe into a new child. So they basically got what the child was, put him into a metaphorical blender, got that remains, and then constructed an artificial new Time Lord, and that became a Doctor. So in a sense, there were two beings, a child and then the Doctor. They're two distinct beings, but one came out of the other one. It's like, think about Piccolo, a new Piccolo. So you've watched Dragon Ball Z, you have a character called Piccolo, but before you had Piccolo, you had another character called Piccolo, and that was an evil character, and when Piccolo was defeated, he resurrects himself as a complete identical being, but also a new character, who was born from an essence. Same kind of principle here, I feel, is what we're meant to understand as having happened. So basically, like the child incarnations aren't part of a Doctor's incarnations. They're the incarnations of a previous being who then became the Doctor. And but the key point of the episode was the Doctor realised, look, if it's part of my early life, which I don't remember, but everything that I am today came from everything that happened after that, where I had a blank slate and I developed a new personality, a new individuality, and that's my identity now. I feel that was a message. Like, it doesn't matter who you were in a previous life. What matters is the person you've built yourself to be now. And it was that realization that let the Doctor break out of the Matrix. And I felt that was the proper resolution to have. That was a good resolution that kind of explained everything. And then the Doctor was not fine with everything that happened, but they were comfortable again in their identity. We kind of backtrack a bit in this episode where the Doctor explains that they now don't know who they are, which seems to have backtracked slightly. But I suppose if you spent 10 months in prison thinking about things that might be what happens, you often backtrack on your identity anyway. So I'm willing to overlook it. I just feel it kind of didn't really continue that plotline. Fair enough. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Revolution of the Daleks. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for the 5 people who tuned in. I hope you got something out of my insight. I'm going to go do a poo now because I feel a poo coming along. You don't need to know that, but this is the kind of honest candor you get from Harris Qureshi. On that note, Happy New Year, I guess I should say. And yeah, thanks for tuning in.